Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Welcome to ARFQuant seminar. Our topic today is about operational risk management and compliance control during the pandemic. Forgive me introduce a little bit about our company, ARFQuant. ARFQuant is a company specializing in consulting and training in risk management, finance, and insurance. ARFQuant has head office in Vietnam, and its experts located in many countries such as in France, England, New Zealand, Singapore, and Vietnam. In our seminar today, there is Mr. Fred Vasilet, a risk management consultant with 25 years of experience. He is a frequent speaker at international conferences and a public author of the risk management and the Basel. Now Fred is based in England. We have also Mr. Bảo Nguyen, who has 25 years of experience in complaint control, internal audit, and a former chief secretary of the board supervisory of Asian Bank. He is now working in New Zealand. Okay, let's start with a sharing from Mr. Fred Vasilet on operational risk management during the pandemic. Hello, Fred. How are you? Thank you very much for attending the seminar today. I understand that the pandemic at the moment in London is still very serious. Could you please share with us your thoughts on the roles of operational risk management in banking during this very period? Thank you.
Yes, Yen. Of course, in London, we are now dealing with a very serious operational risk. In this graph here, we are very much in the lower phase of the problem. If you come back one slide, actually, I would like to say one or two things about them. First thing about risk, I like very much to make sure when we analyze a specific risk, we talk just about same thing and precise about the word. A few minutes about what is hazard. In this example here, I use the risk of flooding. In other words, water inundating the bank and everything. First thing is you must have the presence of clouds for having inundations. The clouds maybe provoke some rain. The rain may provoke overflow, and the overflow may provoke some water in your building. And as you see in the picture down and so on, people having to evacuate these things. And so the list of tasks to be done is first identify and define the risk first. And so this is generally a very basic things to do. And once we have done this, we know everybody what we talk about. Okay, I'm going to talk mostly how to arrive at this slide. Objective of this slide is to provide a framework for risk managers to, once you have identified the risk, know what is to be done with it. If you ask ISO, International Standard Organization, they will tell you the framework of 4 T's, which is tolerate, transfer, terminate, or transform. And basically, it doesn't let you very much of freedom to do much of it. This framework is more complete and allows the bank to really manage the risk in the best way. Let me now come back to just the general thread of my my presentation now. Operational risk in general, and I'm not talking only about operational risk management as opposed to compliance management, which is, as Bao will probably tell a lot, is the big temptation of bank to just comply and not think very much about it. Operational risk management might have started with the first bank, it may have started officially with Basel II in 2000 or so, where banks were required to prove that they have effective processes in place. Supervisors demanded that banks comply, and complied with the banks. However, losses continued to accumulate, exemplified by rogue trading episodes, Barings, SocGen, UBS, and a few other examples. Each of the examples were just copies of the precedent examples. In 2007, when there was the subprime crisis, it showed again and again that supervising banks' relationship with the banks needed to be run into a more adult relationship, I would say. Banks needed not just to comply, banks around the world actually. Bao will speak better about Vietnamese banks. So banks around the world needed not just to comply, but to find their proper way to have more effective handling of risks. And operational risk management then at this point came to progress a little bit. Sources for operational risk method had to be found outside just regulation and outside traditional corporate risk management. Just trying to avoid operational mishap could lead to building just rigid bureaucracies. But a bank is not a banker. It doesn't need to be rigid. It needs to operate within the full economy and to be very flexible. Therefore, an appropriate risk management framework now needs to include a well-understood concept of resilience. Resilience, that's a very serious word to be used in a very, very precise definition, please. Be very careful when somebody uses resilience. What do they mean by this? It's something cool to have, but just don't use it in any way. Especially central banks use resilience in a different sense. Historically, tragically, the problem of different shocks and history just helps us. And the banking world had in 2007 to perform very big real life and real death stress tests then and now, right now, in the form of a pandemic, including in Vietnam. I'm pretty sure, well, first, you have issues with the virus itself, obviously, but also tourists coming less or not coming, and whatever else. And the banks everywhere are very much affected by the virus. Now, what is to be done out of it? There are a lot of things. But now really the priority, even less than any time, is to comply with what the Central Bank of Vietnam says. Obviously, yes, you have to comply, obey, please. Yeah, but obeying will not get the bank to the best banks in the world. Understanding better your risk than everybody else may get your bank into the best bank in the world. Great. Now, what I would like people to do at home, especially after this webinar, is to review every risk they can think of within their bank, and probably there will be a lot. And so review this risk in the light of the pandemic situation. Has the risk changed significantly? And if yes, obviously. Now, we had before the pandemic set up probably some ways to address the risk. Especially, actually, bankers like very much to address risk by financing by capital requirements. Yeah, that's a great thing. A few of the risks here. Well, the first one is obviously challenges to maintain good operations during the pandemic, when a lot of people cannot go to the office and so on. I am pretty sure risk of checking what every worker does as much as possible is now, well, definitely a challenge. And making sure that in case somebody wants to do something, well, something stupid, in case of internal fraud or whatever other things to do, the risk is contained. As I mentioned, fraud, the next risk is fraud risk, external fraud. There has been quite a lot of more fraud coming actually during the pandemic. Next risk is risk of losing business when activities can restart, if and when they restart. Risk of inefficient operation, emergence of new competition, lack of available staff. Is the staff have been sick or don't come back to work very quickly? So, and the next one is credit risk. Obviously, credit risk is not operational risk, it's another risk, but one of the big part of meeting between credit risk and operational risk is the risk of the credit risk model. The credit risk model that has been done before the pandemic has input data, especially probability of default, that are most likely to be absolutely irrelevant right now. And so recalibrating, rechecking, revalidating the credit risk model is a big emergency, especially when we have now very, very little relevant data about credit risk. Now, we have obviously with the risk the two extreme attitudes. Insouciance, well, I don't care about the risk, I'm optimistic and so on. And the opposite attitude, which is paranoia. I don't get out of bed because, well, things are too dangerous. And so even going from my bed to my working room is too dangerous because of virus now. Okay, these are very extreme attitudes, but between these attitudes, we can have some risk appetite, which changes according to the situation. I recommend, by the way, whatever is your general risk appetite, to lower your risk appetite during crisis, and whenever the crisis shows some sign of finishing, then make risk appetite very, very, very high to make sure that recovery happens as quickly as possible. And so here what we can show is a methodological framework to handle risk in an optimal way, so as to minimize uncertainty, minimize losses, but without compromising the agility of the bank. Agility is key. Okay, I explained the ISO framework with the 40. And so if we apply to the pandemic now the 40, there is no way to well, tolerate the risk. It's impossible. Well, it's ethically impossible. Terminate the risk. I don't think it's possible right now. Transfer to whom? Nobody. And transform the risk. There is very, very little that can be done. In other words, the ISO framework in the present case leaves the bank in a totally dead end. Impossible to do anything. On the other hand, my framework here just allows a lot of different things for banks to make sure they can, within the present situation of pandemic and the future situation after lockdown is progressively lifted, to make the best out of the situation. Okay, that's just my conclusion now. Okay, so what we suggest to bankers, well, before the pandemic and especially now, is to use such framework rather than just doing as they did, as people did very usually, is financed by capital, not try to mitigate or to do much with the risk else, but as long as capital is there, that was okay. That was the thinking. But now, well, in the pandemic, the risks are now getting too extreme. Capital, I am not sure this is going to be enough anyway. Yeah, even if there is a lot of capital in there. And so quite a lot of other strategies are much less expensive with capital, well, a little bit more expensive with brain power, but this is really how we can handle every risk, including the risk linked with pandemic, in the optimal way.
Thanks Fred for sharing. Hi everyone. And now I talk about operational risk and compliance in the pandemic. Summer is coming in Vietnam and the weather is starting hotter day by day. While in New Zealand, where I'm living, is in autumn and start colder. Some believe that the weather is one of the factors to encourage or superior limited the spreading of coronavirus. Currently, the epidemic is subsiding in many countries, including Vietnam and New Zealand. The both countries have been closed the borders and lockdown conditions in few weeks. Lockdown in New Zealand is high chance to move back to level 2 in the next week, from which most businesses start open again. Vietnam is in the same situation. It seems that talking about operational risk in the coronavirus pandemic is no longer a hot topic. So far, this topic is about to review operational risk in the pandemic. I believe that sharing knowledge, experience, and ideas is always useful for preparing a similar situation in the future. Firstly, talking about operational risk of the enterprises. There are two categories of businesses in the lockdown: essential and non-essential businesses. Those are defined essential ones that can still operate wholly or partially. In another one, non-essential companies must be closed completely. Lockdown policies and clarification of essential companies varies among nations. In New Zealand, essential businesses include food factories, supermarkets, medical and hospital systems, government offices, public transport, and banking financial organizations. In Vietnam, most enterprises could solely decide to either shut down or not. The lockdown policy also apply not the same among cities that's in Vietnam. The non-essential enterprises shutdown could impact the business that are still operating. For example, a yogurt product is a factory made from many materials, jars, labels, and packages. Lacking one of the material or jars or label or box can lead to postponing on the operation of the production. The the operational risk of manufacturers is lacking material for production, high inventory, delay of delivery services lead to the business unable to meet customer demand on time, and the losses from unable collecting receivable. Talking about commercial banks and security firms, working at home is a solution for some in other kind, which can lead to shortcoming and fraud. Besides this, the increase of risk, the increase of irrecoverable loans and devalue portfolio will contribute to financial crisis, when can lead to financial fraud. The longer pandemic, the more bankruptcy will be inevitable. The second thing I want to talk about is the compliance of companies to the regulation of protecting employees from virus infection. In New Zealand, the government has clearly stated that all businesses who still operating must provide things such as a mask, hand sanitizer, for customers and employees of the company. Keeping distance to make sure health and safety in workplace, and the government will have inspections for this compliance. In Vietnam, I know that there's such the same regulation. However, many companies have not complied this rule. The employer let staff buying themselves masks and hand sanitizer. They also didn't care staff whether or not wear masks at workplace. The fact that hand sanitizer and masks are really scarce in Vietnam. When the epidemic broke out, even companies could not buy to provide for employees. Therefore, compliance with working safety regulation during the epidemic needs the attention of the government, business owner, and every single staff. Once infected employees can lead to other employees and customer infected virus, and as a result, the business must be closed. The third issue is about employees. There will be employees who do not want to go to work because the fear of disease infection, or employees who are quarantined because of infections or suspected infection. For example, in Vietnam, the apartment you are living may be suddenly blocked and quarantined for 2 weeks, 3 weeks at any time because there was an infected person in the building. So if you are disease factor in the production process or in the procedure of a financial company, now you cannot go to work, then obviously it's greatly affect to the business activities of the company. Another issue is the moral of working employees. In New Zealand, companies have to decide which employees are at home and which one must go to work. The non-working employees will receive subsidy from the governments, while working employees receive a salary not much different with subsidy. Disgruntled employees from burdening more tasks than unusual may make shortcomings, neglect, misappropriation, scheming, or fraud at work. In Vietnam, the reduction of working hours mean a reduction in income and no subsidies. In addition, staff awareness of isolation should be concerned. In the time of lockdown, New Zealanders are very good in stay at home for isolation. However, in Vietnam, people still gather to party at home, even go to public places such as markets, beaches, and parks. The stay-at-home regulations are almost ineffective in small cities and provinces. As a result, the reduction of employees in the workplace is an inadequate internal control system. An employee who is at home may be required to provide his user and password of the account system for to others to use create transaction in the accounting software system. The control of transaction is also limited to if the staff and his supervisor have to work at home. The last part of the operational risk is fraud arising. The employees may take advantage of the lack of control system in the pandemic to misappropriate company assets and scheming. For business owner, there will be two types of crime at the management level. Some business owners will try to hide the losses to keep their good images with stakeholder, and the other type, enterprises that previously hid their financial weaknesses. Now they will show up on losses and claim that the reason of financial weaknesses arising due to the downturn of the economy. The next topic I'm going to talk about is the operational response during the crisis. The risk response can be considered at the national and corporate level. As we can see, the risk response include acceptance, avoidance versus reduction, and sharing. When applying a risk response, each country will have different levels based on the endurance of the economy and the impact of the disease. For example, countries will assess the endurance of the economy when deciding on how long the lockdown business is and what type of business can run during the epidemic. For example, New Zealand has locked down at level 4 for 5 weeks, then moved to level 3 in 2 weeks. Most businesses must be closed except for essential business. Some countries have been reluctant to lock down because of fear of the negative affecting the economy, including the US and Europe. At the company level, the company will have to opt which parks are running and which parks closed. Let employees stay at home or work from home. Banking industry, for example, most front office staff must stay home because no more customer coming to the bank, and back office staff can work at home to do some reports. Another example is the closure of the New Zealand Immigration Department, and most of its staff working at home. As a result, decision regarding immigration has been delayed for months. The next is avoidance, means deterring the spread of disease. Asking staff stay at home, keeping social distance, wearing masks, are kind of avoidance at the country level. Enterprises also apply these regulations in workplace to ensure the safety of the business operation. The next one is the pursuit of risk. At the government level, policies on disease detection and prevention need to be strictly implemented and transparent and timely shared. New Zealand government has set up a website to share on related coronavirus information. For businesses still running, building an internal information system about coronavirus is very important. In Vietnam, for example, the government can isolate a whole department of several thousand people when someone found infected virus. Businesses need to immediately inform of the quarantine employees so that they can replace promptly. Infected employees should notify the business to require all the relevant employees to isolate. The visits of customers should be also recorded. If then the customer is infected, the exposed employees must also quarantine as well. The next one is risk reduction. Financial institutions need to quickly assess and adjust their portfolios. Risk investment need to be settled and liquidated. For example, securities companies need to reassess their investment portfolio and decide to apply stop loss limits and to avoid the risk of higher losses. Commercial banks need to quickly balance foreign currency liquidity, not-home positions to avoid exchange rate risk. Banks may consider to invest in a long-term bonds with stable interest rates during this time. The last of the risk response is sharing, relevant to manufacturers, as I said at the beginning. For example, a product includes many components, so if one of them is lacking, it will affect the whole operation of the company. In the crisis, the suppliers can be closed or delayed in deliveries of material to the manufacturer. Therefore, the enterprise need a contingency plan that is urgently seeking new partners to promptly supply raw material when they need. The next one is about internal pandemic policy. In fact, this policy covers many of the issues I have present I have presented in the previous sessions. Pro consulting banks and security companies in Vietnam. I know that all companies have issued the emergency policies. The policy includes contents such as dissemination of disease situation, proactive disease monitoring, establishment of an internal communication channel. Employees must proactively report the possibility of the infection or isolation. Disciplinary actions may be also imposed if employees are found to evade declaration. Banks and financial institutions have also made efforts to provide masks, hand sanitizers, and body temperature measurement for employees and customers. However, companies are also facing the scarcity of the masks and hand sanitizers in the market. Next, a safe distance when communicating and working also means reducing the number of employees in the office, but still ensuring segregation and decentralization. Um, how to travel to work is also an issue in New Zealand, although during the lockdown time, the public transport was completely free from essential workers. Most businesses encourage employees using personal vehicles and not take the bus or train. Not gathering and travel to places where is high risk of infection is also a provision in the pandemic policy. It's very difficult to monitor the compliance of staff with this rule because it depends on the sense of employees when they are not at the company. However, some innocent employees who posting party photos on the social medias such as Facebook, Zalo, Instagram, Twitter were also considered evidence of regulatory violations. In Vietnam, this situation very common as we can see in the newspaper about social distance violation, even though in the supermarket. The next one is how to ensure this company confidentiality when employees are working at home. This must be receive the highest concern of the senior management in this period. I will talk about this content in more detail later. The final content of this slide is the compliance with the principle of segregation and decentralization. No matter how many employees stay home or work at home, the company must not allow or tolerance for this issue. Never let the occurrence of a condition that an employee can both create and approve transactions, sharing user and password of the accounting system, and lack of supervision for important processes. For example, a process of depositing money at the bank ATM machine always requires a minimum of at least 5 people, including a cashier, an accountant, a car staff, a car driver, and a security. Only 5 people. Nevertheless, it's impossible that by the reason of COVID-19, the bank reduces the number of members participating in the process, which will result in a failure to separate the function of using the key and password to open the ATM. As mentioned above, in this time of crisis, fraud has many opportunities to appear. I would like to say briefly about characteristic approach and symptom approach. Characteristics approach include pressure or incentive, opportunity, and rationalization. Firstly, personal pressure. For example, an employee who is reduced income will be on family finance pressure, which can result in scheming, misappropriation, and stealing company assets, especially when procedures have been cut off the supervision. For banks, financial organizations, security companies, their balance sheets have a lot of bad debt during and after this period. Of course, nobody wants the portion of the debt back going far away with the limiting of the rules of the state bank. Financial fraud will arise and relate to senior management behavior. Mm, you the balance sheets will be adjusted illegally so that the indices will be comply with the state bank's regulation. Opportunities means the reduction of lack of control, segregation, and will lead to exploitation for the scheming and appropriation. An example of rationalization is comparative psychology. In New Zealand, a worker stay at home receive a subsidy about $480 a week, while essential worker earn about $700 dollars a week. So the working staff think that they work hard, but the salary is not much more than the employees stay at home. Thus, the psychology of comparison will lead to neglect, cheating, and shoplifting in the company. The next one is symptom of fraud. Those who are working related to internal audit, internal control, compliance, have a lot of knowledge about this content. The first is about the documentation, suspicious side of the materials such as untimely entries, uncontrolled entries, lack of the documentation of transactions. Transaction documents are not signed on the effective date. For security company, a broker conduct transactions based on the client credentials but lack customer confirmation for the transaction done. Next is the lifestyle symptom. For example, an employee who is in personal financial difficulties and suddenly find himself having a lot of money to buy luxury electronic device, cars, holiday, and even house. The abnormal lifestyle can be seen even when the economy is developing well, not just in the time of crisis. Line manager, senior manager, and internal auditors should have an eye to the change of lifestyle of the employee. The last one of symptom approach is the behavior. People who are concealing fraud are often very afraid to contact and talk to other colleagues, not to take sick leave or holiday. They fear their fraud will be discovered. Changing daily stats is what scare them and scare them the most and can reveal fraud. Now I talk about working at home. Working at home is a new and inevitable trend in times of crisis to prevent the spread of disease. The must the first must-do thing is to ensure the confidentiality of the technology, software, and documentary of the company. Management also needs to choose online meeting solutions and sharing files in the most secure way. Most confidential documents must be defined to not be shared online and taken home. Employees are required to use company laptops with installed security software and antivirus systems. Other security regulations need to be set out, such as the company laptops has no CD drive, no USB slot, no authority to install software, not hand over company laptop to others, or using for personal entertainment. The quality of internet service for home working also needs to be considered as it will affect the quality and progress of the work. A backup plan is needed in case a lot of internet service and staff cannot work from home. Performance at home is also a new topic. The senior management need to specific policies to achieve business efficiency. It's important to understand the distraction of employees when working at home such as teaching children cooking, gardening, and housing stock. Decentralization of functions, approval authority, control of entry and documents is the basic principle to be compulsory. In my work, I have learned that many employees trust to give their trust another people and give the user password of accounting system to other people. Even the line management give user and password to others to approve entry or disbursement. In lending, the more different level of approval authority of disbursement, the more level of risk is reduced. Those who violated work from home policies, including loss or damaged confidential documents and company laptop, gathering at parties, failing to performance, would be required discipline. The sanctions need to be specific and clear, imposing to each employee to raise awareness and limit the violation. The last item is to encourage self-discipline and ethics. When employees are not in the office, it's difficult to monitor their compliance. So the most important thing is encourage employee emerging their self-discipline and ethics. Cybercrime is the last issue I present today. Cybercrime is increasingly common problem and has always captured the attention of the board of directors. This is a topic that can be discussed for years. Here I would like to summarize only few key ideas. Most important thing to prevent cybercrime is to protect the server system and backup system. For example, according to the State Bank of Vietnam, the backup system of a bank must be installed in a distance at least 40 kilometers from the main server system. Physical main server and backup system need to be strictly protected and limited the authorized person who can enter for install, repair, and maintenance. The backup system should be tested on a regular basis to ensure that when the main server system fails, for example, a physical attack or online attack, the backup system must be operational immediately. I experienced that most of the banks in Vietnam has a contract with the internet service providers to have a private internet line to ensure the system operating stable and uninterrupted. It should be noted that the large bank, such as Vietnam Exim Bank, where I work, has more than 5,000 interconnected computers in more than 200 offices. So it's very important to ensure a good internet service for the stable operation of the system. A private internet connection will already greatly limit the attack of hackers. The next issue is decentralized management of servers and software system, which is a very painful problem for the large banks. There are many divisions in the IT management in the bank. For example, the physical computer system department, the software maintenance and supporting department, the product development department. The managers of these department hold very fundamental keys to related to the bank computer system and database. There is really no decentralization in these managers. They are the ones keep the life of the system. If one of the managers use their authorization to editing, manipulating, or attacking the computer system and software, the detection is very difficult and cannot be timely. The managers are trusted by the board of directors, but the monitoring of fraud symptoms from them, including documents, behaviors, and lifestyle, also especially need to pay a great attention. Now, talking about install malware prevention system. In financial industry, the issue needs to be considered as the most vital operational risk because being hacking and losing a database of customers and transactions could lead to the collapse of a financial organization. The cost of setting up, maintenance, and regularly updating an anti-hacker software system is not small. Hence, it depends greatly on senior management awareness of the importance of database security. Management should also consider establishing the organization IT departments or hiring external IT consultants and outsourcing IT services. The last but very important issue is that financial institutions must always raise customers' awareness of using online banking and financial services. Firstly, financial institutions need to educate customers about being cautious when using online financial services. The least actions that the customer need to take before making online transaction include checking the reliability of the website before entering card information, uh, not installing software that maybe have spyware related in the personal electronic devices, not provide personal information to anyone via phone call, means of social media, and email, and regularly check bank account statements to self-detect unusual transactions. A communication system between the financial organizations with customer via email, SMS, text, and even though phone calls needs to be established and react quickly when the suspicious transaction arises. The confirmation of the transaction needs to be sent immediately to the customer. Both the bank and the customer should proactively contact each other when abnormal transactions are detected. The initiative of actively monitoring abnormal transactions of the bank to notify customers and providing customer services 24 on 24 hours makes the customer always feel confident and secure in using online banking and financial services. If the above contents are implemented well, bank and financial institution will stem risks related to the cyber criminal, which may arise from inside or outside the organization. So this is the end of my presentation, and Mr. Brett, thank you for your listening. You can now ask questions, so Mr. Brett and I can answer, or you can contribute more information related to your actual situation in Vietnam. Thank you and welcome.
Actually, I got a very good question about transferring. Yeah, transferring risk. What does it mean? And why do I include it in the transformation things? When a bank transfers the risk to somebody, it's generally understood that, well, you find somebody stupid or somebody who doesn't know the risk, and you transfer the risk to this person. Which was basically what was done in 2007 with the subprime. The credit risk was just accepted because it was just transferred, well, to my pension fund, for example, and around the world. But in fact, transferring, let's take an example. You take an insurance for a risk, and what happens is that instead of having the risk of, let's say, a car accident or well, using your car or something like this, in fact, you pay just money and you don't have the risk left to you. You transform the risk for yourself into a cost. Cost is sure, it won't change very much, and so on. And so this is why transferring is just a form of transforming a cost, transforming a risk into something.
Em có một câu hỏi này là các cái phần mà mình có nêu ra ấy ạ, thì là nó đã sẽ phục vụ cho cái phần mà liên quan đến khi mà dịch bệnh nó nghiêm trọng và có các cái bối cảnh về việc phong tỏa thì hạn chế các cái công việc ra sao ấy. Thì em muốn hỏi thêm là với cái bối cảnh hiện nay ấy, khi mà Việt Nam đã giảm các cái biện pháp cách ly ấy, và cũng như là thực ra là cũng gọi là về mặt ý thức về cái tầm cái sự nghiêm trọng còn tiếp diễn của dịch bệnh thì của người dân ấy là nó cũng đã giảm đi nhiều. Và em cũng muốn hỏi thêm rằng là các chuyên gia thì có ước tính được về cái bối cảnh tiếp theo để và các cái biện pháp tương ứng cho cái bối cảnh tiếp theo hay không? Bởi vì thực ra nếu mà trên kể cả dịch bệnh ở Việt Nam mà có gọi là giảm đi chăng nữa thì nó vẫn còn các cái mối nguy từ trên thế giới, khi mà dịch bệnh ở các cái nước khác nó vẫn một số nước thì đã qua đỉnh rồi, nhưng mà thực tế là nó có những cái nguy cơ về việc tái phát rồi là vẫn đang tiếp diễn. Thì kể cả như ở Việt Nam và New Zealand ấy, thì em đã quan tâm đến việc rằng là những cái bối cảnh ước tính tiếp theo và những cái kịch bản dự phòng tiếp theo ấy thì sẽ là như thế nào ạ? Thì không biết là các chuyên gia có thể chia sẻ thêm được không ạ?
Hi Fred, we received one question relating to our current situation in Vietnam.
Yes.
Actually, the pandemic is not such serious in Vietnam at the moment, and we quite kind of recover after the pandemic. So the question is that actually even in Vietnam, the serious is not so much, but in other countries it's still ongoing. So do you have any estimation in the future of this pandemic, and what will happen in case that do you think that it can be the pandemic can be returned again in some countries that have already recovered, and what is a scenario that you can think of?
Wow, this is a question for President of the United Nations. This one, yeah. Okay, I try to my best to answer as completely as I can. Okay, first, I assume that Vietnam is really escaping the pandemic and not escaping the way North Korea and Uzbekistan do. Is just denying that the pandemic exists and so on. Okay, and so in this case, this is now the upside risk. In this case, Vietnam has got a great opportunity to become the very rare country to be able to do, well, whatever they can. And so the business that can be done only by Vietnam, only by non-affected countries can then be done. It's now, in this case, the right time for Vietnam to be able to take the steps towards recovery and build, well, obviously, mask testing cases for testing kits for other countries and export massively them. And this is maybe what banks can do. When banks in other parts of the world can do only business remote, and so very limited remote, very limited business, then Vietnam can take over a very competitive situation in this respect. The tourism industry especially, can you imagine the average tourist in the world? You tell him you can go to, well, China, but it's a lockdown. You can go to this place, but you will have to go to quarantine first. Or you can just go to Vietnam and everything run as usual. And so you will have your tourism industry, which can double capacity and double profits probably and more. And so banks must be able to finance the tourism industry to increase capacity. This is a upside risk now. Its upside risk is very much ignored type of risk. But the key thing now is for Vietnam to exploit opportunities due to the fact that you don't have very much of virus.
Dạ vâng, thì thật ra đây cũng là cái, tức là khi em hỏi về bối cảnh ấy thì em cũng hỏi là vậy là theo đánh giá thì có thể coi như là cơ ở trong phần nguy cơ đúng không ạ? Khi mà có phần này thì em muốn hỏi là vậy thì đối với các doanh nghiệp và các ngân hàng ấy thì với bối cảnh như vậy thì những cái việc mà về quản trị rủi ro này, về kiểm soát tuân thủ này thì mình có gọi là xây ra những cái kịch bản mà tương ứng với việc rằng là sẽ phát triển đi theo cái phần mà cơ hội mà đang có và cái phần mà mình sẽ gọi là có phải duy trì những cái kịch bản ấy để mà đề phòng cho trường hợp tái bùng phát hay là những cái việc mà kiểm soát lại hay không?
Okay. Hi, Fred. Another question from the same person. She asked us, what should the bank or corporates in Vietnam do in the case that, do you think that they should continue to queue up some scenarios, some plans to obtain these opportunities, the competitive opportunity? And do you think that we should also queue up some plans in case that the virus come back to Vietnam?
Okay, if you ask me the question about epidemiology, I am not personally very convinced that Vietnam will always escape the virus. And so, yes, there should be definitely a reinforcement of the scenarios for stress testing for Vietnam. But this is a question for epidemiologists rather than a banker, this one. And so I answer with precautions. Anyway, I think the set of scenarios that banks use for stress testing must be reviewed in the light of the fact that after the pandemic is finished, if it's finish one day, the world will be very different anyway. There will be a lot more of precautions against the next pandemic, a lot of changes, and a lot of companies have gone bankrupt in between. And so prepare for the post-pandemic world as well. That's a key thing.
Hi, friends. There's a member has a question about smart strain. She has a question about let her know the risk appetite will be changed after the pandemic. And can you provide specific example, please? Thank you.
Well, risk appetite in general, it's a very synthetic idea. Example, you know, it's well difficult, but actually I answered with the chat thing. Typically, risk appetite it goes up. When a baby just learns about life, risk appetite goes up until he gets burnt or hurt, and then risk appetite goes suddenly down, and then up again, and so on. For banks, it's very much the same process that goes. People think we should be optimistic and blah blah blah. Yeah, risk appetite goes up. They take a lot of risk until there is a next crisis. Ooh, and big paranoia, and then up again slowly. And so on. In terms of example, why does it go this way? Let's say for credit risk, it's very common for very naive banks to think that when the credit risk is very successful, in other words, they don't have very much of credit risk, bankruptcies and the default happening, the banks collectively think, oh, we are very good now, we have understood very well, and so we should lend to, let's say, more risky borrowers. A typical example is the US banking industry until 2007, when they ended up really lending to individuals in the subprime who should never have borrowed anything in the first place. And well, the rest has been history, obviously. This is what really happens in practice. What I recommend is for banks to look at history always. Never forget history, because first, history is fun, it's interesting, and second, it helps to have a very constant type of risk appetite over time, rather than accidents, paranoia, then going to insouciance, and then and so on. Yeah, and study history. Don't forget about the lessons of history.
Thanks for Mr. Pratt's answer. Based on my experience, the risk appetite is decided by many factors. First and foremost, the most crucial factor is financial market condition and competitors. For example, when the market has many conditions to develop, the large banks such as Vietcombank set a target of 20% growth in the next year. Shareholders of the other commercial banks such as Exim Bank, ACB or Sacombank would like to have the similar growth rate. A high growth rate puts pressure on the board of directors and senior management to increase the risk appetite to meet shareholder wishes. The second factor is the change of the structure of board of directors and the senior management, especially the CEO. Newly appointed and elected senior personnel tend to want to bring in the new achievements to the organizations, so the result is to increase risk appetite. The final determinant of the risk appetite is the portfolio of financial institutions. For example, large banks such as Vietcombank, BIDV, and Actuary Bank will focus on lending to large national projects, and most of them are no collateral, while smaller commercial banks will mainly focus provide real estate mortgages. Thus, based on the different factors, the risk appetite of each bank is different, and the risk appetite of a bank also varies from time to time. Um, Back to the period of 2007 and 2010, when the global economic crisis is emerging, infrastructure construction industry developed very hot in Vietnam, and many banks focus on lending to the steel industry. By 2009, the real estate market rose, steel industry plummeted, and a series of businesses in the field of construction went bankrupt. Fraudulent cases of steel mortgages had occurred, causing huge losses to the major banks in Vietnam. The risk appetite of the entire bank system and immediately changed at that time, stopping, for example, by stopping lending to steel industry and real estate, focusing on handling bad debts, improving quality of loan appraisal, and cutting down the discretion of branch managers. Thus, the current epidemic situation can be prolonged, affecting the economic crisis. Then the financial system will face many difficulties related to falling interest rates, increasing bad debt, total risk appetite will change in the direction of restructuring business operation, limiting real estate lending, and liquidating risk investments.
I would like to ask about and press about how can we compute all the costs of operational risk and how to apply Basel for medium financial institutions which may not apply Basel for. and how to risk over time related to it?
Yeah, I'm not sure I heard well everything. How can you apply Basel IV was one of the questions you asked. Well, this would be more a question for Bao, but yeah, Bao, please feel free to intervene. In my personal view, a bank in Vietnam has got two different things to gain from being Basel compliant. Well, first, obviously, making regulator happy, which is anyway necessary, whatever happens. But second, getting credibility towards other banks outside of Vietnam. When a bank can say, well, I am Basel II compliant because this is a rule anyway, okay? Yeah, but I am also Basel IV compliant because I want to be at international standards the same way banks from Switzerland will be, let's say. Yeah. And so there is quite a lot of things to say in terms of being Basel IV compliant. It's recognition, if you want. But problem is that your central bank or your supervisor will probably not officially be able to say this bank is Basel IV compliant. Regulator will probably say my banks, plural, are wonderful, blah, 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 and so on, yeah, which they all do, but they will not intervene in the competitive situation of banks.
Basel IV was adopted in 2016, and developed countries are starting to apply research. However, in Vietnam, it's only the beginning of the application of Basel II. The level of Basel application does not depend on the desire of each economic organization. It depends on the macro management of the government. The decision to apply Basel level 2 or 3 or 4 is greatly influenced by the influence of transparency of the economy and the financial system. The fact that the banking system in Vietnam has revealed a lot of weaknesses, so it's impossible to apply for Basel IV right now. Even some banks in Vietnam are currently just starting to study the application of Basel II. Large banks has to hire external consultants, such as international auditing firm, to assist accomplishing the Basel II reporting system. It takes banks many years to successfully install the Basel reporting system. The biggest obstacle in building a Basel rating system is the accounting system, which is regulated by the State Bank and the Ministry of Finance. IT team of a bank need to access the sources data to be able to calculate the financial indicators required by Basel. Besides the financial ratios that can be obtained from the financial statement, regulatory supervision and market discipline pillars are currently being assessed qualitatively, by which not yet reflect the actual quality of the governance of the banks. The internal control and internal audit activities management reports of Vietnamese banks currently do not fully cover the content to meet the requirements of the Basel II. So in my opinion, Basel IV as a grim is difficult to fulfill in the present time. Hi, friends. We have a member asking a component in the Basel IV. Can you have any idea? Do you see the message, Fred?
Yes, I'm not sure I can give a good answer to this about well, the operational risk charge, which well, I will correct it in the capital for operational risk. Problem of computing this. The calculation has been changing, and it has been started by a very crude something and so on. But my view on the operation risk capital requirements is that they are by nature not really sticking to what is necessary. Example, if you have got, let's say, an extreme risk, operational risk, let's say risk of pandemic just hitting your bank only. If the epidemics get into your bank, you will lose a lot of money, but you don't have any idea how much. And so, if the risk does not occur, your capital requirement would be wrong anyway, because it will be too much. And if the risk does occur, you probably know that your capital will probably not be enough, and you don't have any clue how much capital would it be. And so that's a problem why, the calculation of capital requirements just follows the guidelines or the requirements of your regulator. And, it will be good for the regulator's business, but for your bank, risk capital is not relevant for operational risk. It can help a little bit because money can always help at everything, but the best way to manage better operational risk is to know a lot about it and apply the different strategies. Capital requirement is just one of 23 strategies only.
Okay, thank you very much, Fred, for sharing all the opinions, and hope that we can have you joining us in next meetings. And be safe. Be careful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was worried about you, Fred, in England situation now.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
If you're so worried about the situation there, you can come to Vietnam. You may have more advantage there in lots of things that you can be safer.
I see you now.
Good idea. I just discovered that I forgot this button actually. Yeah.
Oh no! Please, we can do the meeting again. We started. Okay.
Yeah, but I didn't want to change during the class and so on. Well, yeah, great. Yeah.
Okay.
I will be very happy if there is any flight now running between UK and Vietnam. Yes, I will be very happy to join you. Yeah.
Yes. Xin cảm ơn các anh chị và các bạn đã tham gia trong buổi họp ngày hôm nay ha. Chúc các anh chị luôn giữ nhiều sức khỏe và mình cùng nhau vượt qua cái cơn đại dịch này và sẽ gặp nhau trong những cái buổi hội thảo sắp tới ha. Ở bên New Zealand bây giờ đang là 10 giờ đêm ha. Bên Việt Nam mình thì chắc là 5 giờ chiều hả? Đang là 5 giờ chiều thì thôi chúc các anh chị vẫn là một cái buổi tối vui vẻ.
Bên Anh thì đang là 11 giờ sáng.
Hi friends, thank you for your sharing today. We close now. Yes, we know that it's the early morning in England, so you have dedication for our meeting. Thanks a lot, and hope to see you again in next meeting.